Okay, so picture this. It's a totally normal Tuesday morning, November 18th, 2025. You grabbing your coffee, you're logging on, but something's wrong. A huge part of the internet has just vanished. And the craziest part, it wasn't some big dramatic cyber attack. The culprit was a single tiny bug. And that's what makes this story so wild. It shows you just how fragile the foundations of our digital world can be.
So to really get what happened, you have to understand Cloudflare. This quote pretty much says it all. When Cloudflare stumbles, the internet feels it. And that is no exaggeration. Think of them as the invisible scaffolding for a huge chunk of the web. They work in the background to make everything you do online faster, safer, and more reliable.
But on that day, that scaffolding didn't just stumble, it completely fell apart. And we're about to dive into how that one single crack started a massive, global domino effect that nobody saw coming.
So just how big of a deal was this? Well, at its worst, this outage wiped out about 1/3 of the world's 10,000 most popular websites. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. If the internet felt broken that day, it's because, well, a massive piece of it literally was.
And the list of who got hit reads like a who's who of the internet. We're talking X, ChatGPT, Spotify, Zoom, you name it. It was so bad, so widespread, that even Down Detector, the very website you go to check if other sites are down, it was down. That is how you know things are really, really bad.
So this begs the question, right? How can one single company having a problem cause this much chaos across the entire globe? Well, the answer really gets to the core of how our modern internet is actually built.
It all just boils down to sheer scale. Cloudflare handles the traffic for about 20% of the entire internet. A huge part of how they do that is by using something called a Content Delivery Network, or CDN.
Okay, so a CDN sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. And frankly, it's brilliant. Instead of having everyone on the planet try to get a website's data from one server in, say, California, a CDN makes copies of that website and stores them on servers all around the world.
So if you're in Tokyo, you get the data from a local server right there in Tokyo, not from one halfway across the planet. This makes everything lightning fast. But it also means that Cloudflare is the essential middleman between you and a massive portion of the web.
So now we get the scale of it. But how did this incredibly powerful globe-spanning system get brought to its knees by what engineers started calling the billion-dollar bug?
Yeah, as Cloudflare admitted later, this wasn't some sophisticated hacker group. It was a totally self-inflicted wound, a hidden bug in their own software that got triggered by a completely routine, everyday internal update.
And this is where things get wild. Check out this chain reaction. It all started with a simple, tiny database permission change, but that one change caused a query to spit out duplicate data. This bloated a key configuration file, making it twice as big as it should have been. And when that huge file got pushed out to their global network, it hit a hidden size limit, and the whole system just panicked and crashed.
You know, you can think of it like this. The system was expecting to be handed a one-page document, but suddenly it got a two-page document that it just wasn't built to handle. It had no idea what to do, so it just shut down. It was a tiny digital typo that had massive global consequences.
And you can just feel the tension in this timeline. The error started popping up at 11:20. For the next 3 hours, you can imagine engineers were just scrambling, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. They finally got core traffic back up around 2:30, but it took almost 6 full hours to get every single system back to 100%.
Now, an outage that lasts for hours and takes out 20% of the web, that's not just some minor inconvenience. No, that's a massive economic event. And the price tag is just staggering.
So while it's tough to get an exact number, most analysts agree that the total damage was in the billions of dollars. Billions from a single software bug. So how in the world does a cost like that stack up so fast?
Well, it's basically a perfect storm of financial pain. First, you've got the obvious stuff, direct revenue loss. Every online store that couldn't make a sale, every ad that didn't get seen. Then you have lost productivity. Think of all the companies that rely on tools like Zoom just to function. And then there's the hidden cost, the damage to a brand's reputation when it just blinks out of existence. And yeah, the pain was felt everywhere, but it was especially bad in industries that live and die by the second. E-commerce sites went totally dark, crypto exchanges froze mid-trade, and the entire global remote workforce, which pretty much runs on cloud software, basically just took an unscheduled 6-hour break. So,
Okay, beyond the bug itself and the billions of dollars lost, we get to the really important question. What's the real lesson here? What does this one event tell us about the future of the internet?
This quote really just nails it. This whole crash was a brutal, painful reminder of the dangers of centralization. See, we've built this incredibly efficient internet where huge parts of it rely on just a handful of companies. But that efficiency comes with a terrifying risk, a single point of failure that can set off a catastrophic domino effect.
It's this classic trade-off, you know? Centralization is like having one master key for an entire apartment building. It's super simple and efficient. But if you lose that one key, you're in huge trouble. Decentralization is like giving every tenant their own key. It's way more resilient if one key gets lost, but it's also a lot more complex to manage.
For their part, Cloudflare went into full-on damage control mode, promising a bunch of major fixes. They're basically building better checks to catch bad files before they can do any harm, they're installing bigger and better emergency stop buttons, and they're launching a massive hunt to find and destroy any other single points of failure that might be hiding in their system.
And this right here is the ultimate takeaway for everybody. The internet is way too complex to ever be perfect. Problems are going to happen. So the real goal isn't to stop every single failure before it starts. The goal is to build systems that can take a punch and get back up fast. It's all about resilience.
Which leaves us with this one giant question for the future. You know, on one hand, we have more backups and smarter systems than we've ever had before. But as we continue to hand over the keys to the internet to just a handful of these massive companies, are we actually building a more resilient web, or are we just building a more efficient and ultimately a much more fragile one?